Good evening, and welcome to Engage at the Bush Center, presented by Next Point. We're grateful for those of you who have gathered here today live and watching on the live stream. Thanks to President and Mrs. Bush for their attendance as well. Special thanks to Next Point for endowing our Engage series. Without supporters like Next Point, we would not be able to bring you such great programming. And also to Boeing for sponsoring this program and the important conversations that we're having. We have a lot of people here tonight who have not been inside our walls and at our events, and so I'd like to have a moment to say a special welcome and welcome to the Bush Center, and hopefully this is not the last time that you're here. The goal of our programming here is to be an important asset, a vital voice, both in North Texas and across the country. We use our convening power and our thought leadership platforms to highlight important issues and to work to make our community better. Tonight's conversation is an example of that in action. And we're grateful for Boeing for their ongoing support for our work, as well as the sponsorship of this exhibit. And with us tonight from Boeing to introduce our first panel is William Mpofo, Vice President of Parts and Distribution Services and Supply Chain for Boeing Global Services. Please welcome William Mpofo.
Well, good evening, everyone. First of all, I'd like to thank Ken for the introduction. It's just a pleasure to be here this evening as we continue to celebrate Black History Month. First of all, I just want to thank you, President Bush, Mrs. Bush, Ken, and the incredible staff here at the Institute as we partner with Boeing over the years. In an effort to build a robust and diversified talent pipeline, we at Boeing are committed to investing in programs to help educate, mentor, and develop men and women from underserved communities. And our partnership with the Bush Center has gone back to 2018 when we made a $10 million contribution, if you recall, and really to support the various initiatives at the center. The Veterans Leadership Program, which is very near and dear to Boeing's heart, the First Lady Initiative, and also the We Lead program, which equips women from Middle East, North Africa, and Afghanistan with the skills to become more effective leaders. But as we all know, it goes much further and beyond monetary giving to make a long-lasting change. We all have to be a lot more intentional about what we do to make an impact. And in 2020 at Boeing, we launched our Equity Action Plan, and it's really focused on 3 pillars. 1, rooting out systemic racism, advancing progress on key measures of equity and inclusion, and then thirdly, strengthening the company's commitment to community investments. And that's what brings us here tonight, where exhibits like the Continual Struggle help foster change by inviting the community to explore these compelling works and participate in the ongoing dialogue. Really important. These 25 pieces on display provides a powerful and moving timeline of America's historic struggle for civil rights. And candidly, the battle still continues to this day. So I'd like to say it's my pleasure to be able to introduce our first panel. And let me begin with the closest to the podium, our moderator, Emmy Award-winning Laura Harris of NBC-5. You got some fans here, Laura. Laura can be seen co-anchoring on Channel 5 weekday mornings from 4:30 a.m. for you early risers to 7 a.m. Next to Laura is our headliner tonight, ladies and gentlemen, the artist behind the extraordinary exhibit, The Continuing Struggle, the American Freedom Movement and the Seeds of Social Change, Mr. Byron Washington. And for Byron, as if his incredible success as an artist isn't enough, Byron is also an accomplished attorney. And we'll hear more about his remarkable journey and inspirational thoughts in just a few moments. Next is Ms. Pat Breedy, a retired executive who consults with Byron Washington Company on a wide array of matters. Pat. Seated to Pat's left is Byron Washington's father, Al Washington, or Big Al as he told me earlier. Al is a retired corporate executive who leads the Cincinnati-based Byron Washington Company. Al spearheads programs to advance understanding around the importance of diversity, equity, and inclusion through art exhibits like the one we'll see here this evening. Next is Wayne Box Miller. Wayne serves as the Director of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion at St. Xavier High School, one of the largest high schools in Ohio. Wayne? Wayne is also a long-time member of the Cincinnati Bengals radio network broadcast team. So he just arrived here in Dallas from Los Angeles, where they came up just a little bit short. But I commiserate with you, Wayne, and thanks for being here. Finally, we're joined by Jossie Chisley, an experienced healthcare executive whose book, Healthy Disruption: The Benefit and Burden of a Black Healthcare Executive in America, was published last September. So Jossie, welcome. Also joining us this evening in the audience tonight are Brian's mother, Monica, his brother, Al Washington Jr., or Little Al, and two other members of the Brian Washington team, Brian Edwards and Sam Guthrie. Please join me in welcoming Laura Harris, Brian Washington, and his team to the Bush Center. Thank you.
It's truly my pleasure and my honor to be here this evening with you all, no matter the fact that I got up at 2 o'clock this morning. There is no place I would rather be. I had the honor and privilege to go upstairs and see Brian's work, and when I tell you, it's breathtaking. It really is, because it reminds you that I am standing on the shoulders of the people who are in those pictures. And the way that he has found a way to tell a story of decades for all of us to see it in one place at one time, it's truly incredible. It's more than Black history, it's everyone's history. And what Brian is doing is remarkable. So with that, I want to introduce Brian and his father, Al. They're going to have a conversation here for all of us to enjoy.
Thank you very much, and thank you, Mr. President.
So good.
And Mrs. Bush. We are so excited about being here, and we love this beautiful facility and the kindness and professionalism that everyone has shown us since we were here. The continual struggle, the American freedom movement, and the seeds of social change. Think about that. That was purposely done, purposely delivered by my son, Brian Washington. So as we think about this, who is the Brian Washington Company? Who are we? In a word, the artwork reflects who we are. And one word is pride. Webster defines pride as one who holds himself in high esteem. Mm-hmm. We go one step further, and we like to say pride stands for just what it says: respect, intelligence, dedication, and enthusiasm. We seek integration, not assimilation. We seek the truth. And when you see the artwork, you're going to see we seek the truth. It's a story in itself. We live in a country and culture of courage and change. We like to say that our challenges are real because we seek the truth. When you see the artwork tonight, just be reminded, these are very, very common people that did some extraordinary things. Mm-hmm. And I think we all will be able to relate to every phase of civil rights in America. Brian was able to capture this. He did it over a period of 13 years. 13 years. And I'll get into some of the scholarly things he did behind some of this. But one thing about Brian, and I'm going to talk about his journey a little bit. Brian, family is first. Family is first for Brian and for myself, Lil Al, and his mother, Monica. His parents, my wife and I, we were products of the South. We went to segregated schools until our junior and senior year in high school. Then we were one of the first to go on and integrate the colleges of Alabama. Brian, at an early age, He's always been exceptional. His artwork started out something similar to this, but it was a stick man. He came home from school so excited about his artwork. And his mother, his brother, and I, we laughed. Oh, we laughed. As we laughed, Brian cried. He cried. He cried. Something incredible happened, though. 2 months later, Brian came home with the most beautiful artwork for a first grader. Once again, we accused him, you didn't do this. And he said, I did. And Brian cried again. And since that time, you know, he kept developing. As a matter of fact, Brian was selling Ninja Turtles, for all you people know who that is, and making more money than I was at the time in elementary school. So he was always that kind of guy. He was an exceptional student, exceptional athlete, had a choice of almost any college in the country. He chose Duke University. And during his time at Duke University, Brian became politically aware on a lot of things, and he developed a project that was one of, I think, 4 people for graduation, and it started the continual struggle. As a matter of fact, his first 12 pieces were acquired by the Smithsonian Freedom Center in Cincinnati, Ohio. From there, Brian went on to the University of Southern California Law School, where he was a Dean's List student at Duke, and he also did outstanding at the University of Southern California. From there, Brian achieved, and he has a piece of art that still stands today if you're ever there at the University of Southern California Law School. Still there, outstanding piece of work. From there, Brian went to work for one of the largest law firms in the country, Sidney Austin, where Brian was doing law by day and art by night. And he developed some fantastic work while there, and that's where he finished Continual Struggle. And he was living in Los Angeles. And there, President Clinton saw his work, and he fell in love with Get on the Bus. So he did the forward for this particular, it'll be the last one because Mr. Bush is going to do one also. So Brian developed this project, like I said, over 13 years. And he was always successful. He was always first in everything he did, except that when he finished the project, he was living in Los Angeles. And he came home for 5 days. Brian's been with us for 6 years now. While he was here, and this story I gotta just say, if any of you parents in the bunch tonight, I just gotta appeal to you to take off any hat you might be wearing, even if it's a Dallas Cowboy hat. I want you to think as a parent. Brian, for 5 days, he'd never been back. He stayed for 6 years, and he came down with a horrible something called neurosarcoidosis. So I'm appealing to everybody here. If anybody know anything about it, please let Big Al know. Please let Miss Monica know, because we'd like some help. That's where the continual struggle strikes. One is the visual art, but the other is my son and our family. The continual struggle. We've been up, we've been down, but Brian continues to fight. So when you see the artwork tonight, think about the fight that we're doing. I can't thank you enough for your time. Appreciate it.
paint.
Silence is deafening. In that moment of silence we just experienced, many thoughts were running through your minds, but we were not in sync. Some were thinking, is he nervous? Some were thinking, is he still upset that the Bengals lost? And some of you were just thinking, is this part of the show? Well, it's not a show, it's a story. It's about the courage that people need and the culture of courage that happens when someone like Brian Washington speaks up. You know, I ask a lot of you about the culture of courage in your life. When was the moment that you exhibited courage? Maybe when someone wanted to move in your neighborhood and were kind of dissuaded because others didn't want someone different from them to move in, and you exhibited that culture of courage. Maybe that culture of courage was in the educational system in your community where they didn't want people into that public school system because they wanted to protect it. Maybe they wanted courage from someone to speak up and drown out the silence. We never think of silence as being loud. But when you don't speak, silence is the loudest thing in the room. Until someone has the courage to say, I have to be the change I want to see in the world. And Brian Washington, you were that change, and you used that change through art to create a culture of change. You're going to see artwork that is going to take you back to days of stories that your parents and maybe families told you. You're going to go back to a time where you realized all of us in here right now are here because someone made that sacrifice. And Brian, when I think about your art and what you've done with that art, I know what courage looks like. I can look at Brian's work, and the one that I think about is a dream deferred. And I ask you to take a look at that image behind me, that dream deferred, and where would you be in that image, in that visual? It's not black against white. It never has been. It's good against evil. It's bad against the people that aren't so good. It's always been about that. The beauty of any struggle, the continual struggle or anything of that nature, Brian, is that it was all of us. It wasn't just black. It was male and female. It was everybody saying, we have to make a difference. And so I ask you, as you think about this, Brian, you captured that in a way that I have never seen. I jokingly say I went to Morehead State University. My first semester was an art major. I changed the second semester. When I saw Brian's art, I knew I made the right decision. But Brian has this ability to just bring you into the art, and I invite you as you go into the art to look at what is being said and share that with someone. Find someone you don't know. I love a quote by Charles Caleb Colton that says, we hate some people because we do not know them, and we will not know them because we hate them. Quite simply, you just don't take time to say hello. And so when you think about Brian's work, I think about people like the Freedom Riders. Again, it wasn't just one group of people, it was people that stood on the side of justice. And Betty Roseman, who's one of the original Freedom Riders that lives in Cincinnati, spoke at our school, and she mesmerized, 80 years old, and mesmerized the entire room and talked about escaping death in Alabama. Someone picked her up, got her to Louisiana, and one of the kids said, Miss Roseman, weren't you mad? She said, no, I wanted change more than I wanted revenge. And that's what the continual struggle is all about with Brian. So when you think about the continual struggle, the culture of courage and that culture of change that you've done, Brian, the people that you see depicted in Brian's work, they changed the world together. And my call to action to everybody here, Brian, with your support and Big Al, President Bush and Mrs. Bush, is that we continue to change the world for the better. And it reminds me of a quote that I'll leave you with this. There was a wise man that said he was going to plant a tree knowing he would never see the shade. but he was planting that tree for future generations. Now, thanks to the people that you depicted in your art, we're sitting under the shade tree of freedom and righteousness. Thank you.
There you go.
Well, somebody has to follow these two gentlemen. But you know what? If anybody can do it, it's you, Miss Patricia.
Oh my God, thank you so much, Laura. Brian,
Yes,
we're just going to have a conversation.
okay.
Because we want these wonderful people to know more about your process, your creativity, and the impactful art you've created.
Okay.
Your images are so haunting, Brian. There's so many of your imagery that is represented through the various pieces of your artwork. Things like the elongated hands, the skies and the dark clouds that appear to be swirling. Your imagery just jumps off the page at me every time I look at your pieces. Can you tell us a bit about your imagery and the choices of the elongated hands, the expressions on the faces, and the ominous clouds? Can you talk a bit about your process?
Yes, I thought about that a long time as I was conceiving the ideas for doing this project. And, you know, there's a challenge as an artist because I was trying to, on one hand, depict things that were as realistic as they could be, but there also some symbolism. And there's some visual metaphors in there. And that's what things like the oversized hands are.
Yes.
They're not just like this piece right here. They were very poor and loved. They were very poor, but they were very loved. And you see that with the father with the somewhat oversized hands,
Yes.
who's got hands on the heads and a protective nature of his two young boys,
Yes.
who not only help him with the fields and do all that, but they also stand as one of the reasons that he works for what he does.
Yes.
And right there in the background, you got to see the little girl who's clearly his crown jewel, kind of peeking from behind his leg. And she's a little bit, you know, in the back like that because her brothers are taking the lead, but she is still getting involved. You know, she'll be out there working too.
Yeah.
She will be doing lots of jobs around the house. And, you know, that's the thing. Like, this was a team. And I think when you see a team that has true love, and they're not necessarily just about the financial resources that they don't have,
That's right.
but they still have love, they still depend on each other, and they're still very much important.
That's right.
I think that's very important. And if you look at the man in the front, the father, he's got that weathered look on his face, and it's just to represent the struggle that he's going through,
Yes.
but how important it is for him to lead those who are following him.
That's right.
You know, he doesn't want them to think of themselves as just poor sharecroppers.
Yes.
You know, he wants to think of themselves as rich.
That's right.
You know, they have food, people in other countries might not even have it.
That's right.
You know, and he's trying to set that standard rather than a woe is me standard.
That's right.
And I think that mentality, along with the mentality of we're going to get out here and do what we have to do to
Protect.
get food on the table,
That's right. That's right.
you know, because they were subject to, when the sharecropper, you know, they were not the problem. They were doing labor on land they did not own.
That's right.
And many times, I mean, these people were not short out of slavery, and they were not contractual, you know, experts, and they signed some agreements that were just chicanery. And you know, they paid for things, you know, to the landowner about the property that they basically couldn't make.
That's right.
And it told it. So it wasn't physical slavery, but it became a form of economic slavery.
Slavery. Brian, that was a beautiful answer. Let's move on to the next image. The image that is here, and it is the image of as we forgive those who trespass against us. I noted in your piece the faith-based imagery that is over a lot of your pieces. Can you speak a bit about your use of faith-based imagery?
Well, I think we all know that the civil rights movement itself was based heavily on, spirituality and the church, including some of the very top leaders of the organization, like Martin Luther King, who's a reverend. And they really relied on that, not in a different way than people try to make things out now sometimes. And they relied on that as a sense of support and a sense of faith for people who at some point had lost some faith.
Yes.
So they needed that.
They needed
And that's what made it so appropriate for these people.
That's right.
Because they really did have a true struggle. And that's where it would be completely, inefficient for me as an artist and ineffectual to not, display that in the works.
That's right.
Because it was a very important part of the movement. So there's various pieces throughout the whole work, the whole collection, that show the religious element
Yes.
of the civil rights movement.
Yes.
I mean, they sang freedom songs
That's right.
from church.
That's right.
They had it all. The civil rights leaders at times sounded like silent preachers.
That's right.
They did all these things.
That's right.
And you can't necessarily laugh at them because they did it and it worked.
They made it work.
And they made, in the end, some of the most monumental changes that we could ever hope for. And they did it non-violently.
That's exactly right.
And
You're right.
that's something that I'm very proud of. And I
Beautiful.
feel very thankful for when I see it, because I know that but for them and but for those sacrifices, I wouldn't be sitting here with you guys here right now.
Absolutely what you're doing.
You know,
Absolutely.
You made those opportunities possible.
That's right.
I went to Duke University.
That's right.
And I don't know. No, seriously.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. That's exactly right.
So I'm very appreciative.
That's right. Thank you. Thank you. Let me move to another image. While you take a sip, I'm going to ask you a question. One of your images that was really striking for me was your homage to female sharecroppers. Can you talk a bit about the creation of this image and what you want people to take away from that image?
Well, I'm glad that you appreciated this was a homage to the one sharecropper, because that's exactly what I wanted it to be. I just didn't know exactly what image originally. See, I knew, that's how I come up with these works. Sometimes I just have an image and I'm like, oh, I'll do that, but that's very rare. It's usually, I think about the movement as a whole and the independent elements of it, and I think of something that I know I really need to approach, and then luckily, it tends to come to me.
Yes.
And then I have to execute it.
Yes.
And I'll do whatever it takes to execute it. If I need more information to make the image more accurate and reliable, I'll visit the Library of Congress in Washington, D.C. And I was there as a lawyer.
Right.
And I stopped and made my way over there because they've got these picture files of different parts of American, I think it's called the Farm Security Administration.
Yes.
They have these pictures of old planters. So that's how I put myself in this time. And I sat there and thought of sharing the burden. They were women who, not only did they cook, clean, help raise a child, but they also even got out in the field.
Out in the fields. That's right.
And they weren't afraid to do it.
Right.
And I spent about, it took me a while. I took about, almost 2 months working on this piece, and I was almost done, but the faces were completely blacked out. I hadn't put those in yet. And I was comfortable with the rest of the painting. I thought that it was well executed and, it looked good, but something about it just wasn't grabbing me. Right. And I, have a tendency, when I get into art, I'll just get immersed in it. So I'm really in it.
Right.
So I had to get up, and it was still a day, but I had to go up. It was probably about 4 o'clock, and I had to just take a nap because I just needed. There's a lot of things to be doing, and I'm not comfortable sometimes until it's right. But I went and I had a dream, And in that dream, I dreamed that I was in the field with these women. And I looked and I saw the faces.
Wow.
And when I did that, I was like, oh my God, that's it. Now, this is a painting that I've been working on for almost 2 months.
Wow.
And I got up from the bed and I went up to my upper floor, which is where my studio is, and I put these faces in, and both of them, 45 minutes combined.
Wow.
And and when I did it, it's like the painting just came alive. It was something I've been working on for almost 2 months, and in 45 minutes. And I just looked at him, and I felt like I was with 2 old friends or 2 family members.
Oh, man, you knew you nailed it. You nailed it.
And it just felt alive.
Powerful.
It actually makes me feel more appreciative of their sacrifices.
Yes.
Because I know that those pretty much were, relatives of mine.
Oh, that's beautiful.
And they were in my heart, so.
That's beautiful. Thank you for sharing that. Now, the piece we're going to talk about next is your largest piece, and it is a paint of a darker hue. Can you talk about the size of that piece and all of the images there, and tell us what you want us to know about your creation of that piece?
Well, this is a piece that was really at the very end of the Continual Struggle.
Okay.
I'd been working on the Continual Struggle for years, on and off, as I went to law school, as I became a lawyer and did all these things. But, I tend to weigh on images before I do them.
Yes.
I want to make sure it's something I don't ever have to do again.
Yes.
Because you lose inspiration sometimes when you do it such like get it right the first time. And with this, I just wanted to make a statement about the kind of paradox of violent response to nonviolent protest.
Yes. Yes.
And these are people who were exercising their constitutional rights.
That's right.
And they're being peaceful about it.
That's right.
And they did that at grave danger
Yes.
to themselves.
Yes.
And that's something I'm just so fond of. I don't like to see danger anywhere.
Right.
But I mean, these are people that thought it was so important that you need people to see it.
Yes.
And that's when the Root movement really got, an edge when they started doing these things, and the TV cameras, which were fairly new at the time,
That's right.
started recording this and showing people in the United States, some of the things that were going on in their own country.
That's right.
And
Brian?
this painting
Yes.
is a combination of many of the pieces that led up to it in one piece. And there's very different narrative stories I could tell you that are going on in this one piece.
Beautiful.
So when you guys have a chance to see this, it is a large piece. But if you look everywhere you go, there's something going on.
This is your culminating piece of the entire collection.
Yes.
I find it interesting this piece was created in 14, as you've got it marked. There was so much activity, political activity in 14. There was the protest, a lot of civil rights protests going on based on police actions. And one of the things that comes to mind is that Ferguson happened in 14. Connection between Ferguson and this piece?
Well, honestly, there wasn't a connection in terms of me making it.
Okay,
It was something that was on my heart,
okay.
and I did it. And I kid you not, after putting all the work, I stopped and went to sleep because I'd been, so in on this. And I raised my hand when I finished it because I knew I was able to Continual Struggle.
Okay.
I had one of those moments that you see in movies
Right.
where I'd finished this huge task, and I went to sleep. And when I woke up, I heard, from the television that I hadn't even turned on in like 2 months
Right.
about Ferguson.
Wow.
And it was, a lot of news going on about it. So I sat down and, tried to get back in reality a little bit. And I saw these images that were almost verbatim what I had painted, trying to honor the sacrifices of the people that came before us constitutionally. And it was like it could be a picture that could have been a brand new picture. And that made me very happy that I did it to inspire people, but it also kind of broke my heart because I felt like, you know, we've come a long way on the shoulders of these people, and somehow we may have missed the peak somehow, and we still have work to do. And it even made me think, you know, as all this work that I'm doing on this project, you know, and even this one piece, am I doing that for naught?
Wow.
Like, I mean, I know I can't just change the world by one piece of art, but I hope that I can positively influence people to look at things in an educated way that they can also understand. And that's why I use the visual metaphors that I use sometimes.
Yes.
Because, you know, art can really speak to people in ways that other things can't.
Beautiful, beautiful.
All day. I could listen to them talk all day, and I wish that we had that time, but truly, this has been beautiful just to hear you all talk about what we're seeing in these mediums. Jossie, I'll let you finish up.
Thank you so much, Laura. And I'm going to stand too and take a page from Mr. Miller's book. How about another round of applause for our wonderful author? I know you've been seeing some of the images here on the screen, but once you actually see them in person, they truly, truly move you. So I am going to try to conclude as quickly as I can, because I know you guys want to get to the actual exhibit. And my grandfather, who was a sharecropper in Mississippi, smartest man, only had a third grade education, but the smartest man I know, he told me to always practice the 3 B's of management. You guys know what those are? 3 B's of management: be brief, be good, and then be gone. So I'm going to do that. But I would be remiss in just extending a warm thank you and debt of gratitude to our 43rd president, George W. Bush, and the First Lady. I got to meet them a little bit earlier, and Mr. President is really funny. He's a funny guy. So I enjoyed our conversation, and Mrs. Bush, you are school on Tuesday, just the epitome of class. So thank you so very much for hosting us, and to your wonderful team. I think for me, I've been an investor and a collector of arts, particularly African-American art, for about 13 years now. And I've got some pieces from Jean-Michel Basquiat. I've got a few pieces from Jacob Lawrence. I've got a few pieces from James Bearden. But one of my most prized possessions is actually from Byron Washington. And we'll get into that in a second. And I've been a proud board member for the Byron Washington Company for more than 5 years. And again, it speaks to me. It tells a story. So let me tell you a little bit about my story. I come from very, very humble beginnings. I was born on the south side of Chicago, raised in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. And in Chicago, between the south side and the north side, there's a 33-year gap in life expectancy. We're talking literally about a 3-mile radius, literally a 3-mile radius. So you hear in the news about Chicago being sensationalized with all the violence and everything else, but it's deeper than that. It goes back to the social determinants of health and everything that we're facing. And that's what drew me to healthcare. Healthcare is my ministry. It's how I impact social change. And you're seeing all these and depicting all these things on the screen. It's why I chose Morehouse as my undergrad institution. It's a historically black college in Atlanta, Georgia. I matriculated in there in '94 and graduated in '98, and then went immediately to grad school at the University of Michigan and studied both business and health administration. All of that spoke to me, and it's why I chose a lot of the things that I'm doing now, not only to invest in healthcare, but to try to change it. And you're seeing a lot of these things that are going on in society. And again, healthcare, in my opinion, is a microcosm of some of the ills that society's facing. So a lot of the boards that I sit on, Microsoft being one, trying to address the digital divide in various communities of color. The American Heart Association, one of the first organizations that I know of that actually called out structural racism. I built a company called Square 2, which is essentially a holding company for private equity and firms from minorities. And then, as William so eloquently indicated, I did had an opportunity to write a book that was published last quarter of 21. It's called Healthy Disruptions. And it's a bit of an oxymoronic phrase. It's like good trouble if you follow John Lewis. And it's one of the things that I think we can do together collectively to healthy disrupt our society. But all of that is sort of my story, and you can't sort of understand my story until you see my story. And a lot of my story is depicted in Brian's art. So this is one of the first pieces of artwork that I got from Brian. And it's called, again, Get on the Bus. And the top portion of Get on the Bus is sort of the ode to the end of the Montgomery bus boycott that lasted for nearly 55 weeks. At the bottom are actual depictions of some of that imagery. So holy similarities, Batman. That is something that you could sort of see that it's really, really a striking similarity from the top portion and the bottom portions. And the reason that this spoke to me so and was so insightful for me was because I actually got stories told to me through my grandparents, through my mother. And my grandparents, like the Washingtons, African-American family that's from the South, migrated north in hopes of a better, more opportunities and a better life. And they used to tell me about some of the boycotts that they faced. And they always shared with me about the Montgomery bus boycott. And I would have that sort of seared in my brain, that imagery, but I never got to actually see it until I actually saw Brian's artwork, and it truly moved me. So one of the things that, again, that is so relevant in art today is that how it translates. And you just heard Brian kind of talk about what he was thinking, how he gets so focused when he's actually in a creative mode, but then how it's relevant today and Felidus, very Felidus. So I always like to say there's a lot that's going on that we can, and once you see the art, hopefully it'll move you the same way, but it's a lot that we can apply. So first of all, the pandemic. It's what I sort of call the 3 Ps in the position that the country is in today. First of all, the pandemic has been politicized, highly politicized, and I thought maybe, you know, from a naivete standpoint, that it would have brought us together a little bit more. Protest. The protests, if you remember anything, remember sort of 2 names, 4 words. Obviously, Brian Washington, our artist here today, but Donella Frazier. Donella Frazier was the little girl that actually, she was about 17 years old, that captured the murder of George Floyd on her cell phone. And that was so striking to me is because she actually had an opportunity to capture that and then show it to the world, which actually changed the world. And then the loss of profit. We're obviously seeing the wealth gap actually got widened since the pandemic to the tune of about 188% between a black family and a white family. So I think that there's 4 sort of areas or factors that really are separating us now. 1 is race, 2 is religion, 3 is sort of our regionality, and 4 is our risk tolerance. But we know through the study of genomics that we're more alike. We're much more alike than we are different. And finally, the call to action is not necessarily a call to action. I'm going to strike that a little bit and say a call to confrontation. I think we have to get very, very uncomfortable if we're going to start talking about things that we need to actively change. And that's going to obviously take a lot of courage. It's going to take a commitment on all of our parts, a collective commitment. And then we're going to have to commend each other when we actually are progressing, just like Mr. Miller said. And then we have to coalesce and make sure that we're coalition building so that we can finally heal. On behalf of the Brian Washington Company, it has been my honor to be with you all. Thank you so very much. We hope you enjoy the artwork.
You got it. What an enjoyable panel. We've got plenty more for you. Don't get excited. Don't leave your seats just yet. But thank you all so very much. Brian, you're the reason we're all here. Thank you so very much. And the one thing that I think about when I was able to see the artwork a little bit earlier is I think of a Bible verse, the seeds of good deeds become the tree of life. And I think that all of us have some sort of thing inside of you, whatever that talent might be, whatever that treasure is. And Brian, you're showing us your talent. And because of that, we are all better for it. So I think if each one of us took our talent and sowed that seed, then we would all be able to provide shade for the next generation. So thank you all so very much for being here. We've got another panel coming up in just a couple of minutes. So thank you all so much.
I would like to thank everybody.
We're back. I told you it was just going to be a little bit of a commercial break. It's how we pay the bills.
Yes.
Everybody doing okay? Good, good. That was a really cool discussion that we got to have with Brian. And now we're talking to some people in our community who are helping to further this mission, especially what Brian was talking about. You know, we have to see change. We have to find change where we are. So that's what we're going to talk about now. You may notice some of the people who are up here right now, but I'll let them introduce themselves, give me 2 sentences about who you are. Just 2.
Just 2.
Just 2.
I got you.
Okay. And your name. So that's kind of
That's
3.
part of the sentence.
2.5.
Like that.
Yeah.
Got it. Byron Sanders. I am the husband to Celeste, father
Oh, that's sweet.
to Bailey and Bryce. I'm also the president and CEO of Big Thought, which is an organization that serves young people here in the city of Dallas, helping build their creative skills. And I'm also a child of this city too, so I'm a Dallasite. I'm happy to be here.
Dallasite. I love it. I am Cynt Marshall. I am the proud mother of 4, the wife of 1. I think Kenny is in the audience. 1 for 38 years. Yes.
That's so
Yes.
great.
That's right up there with turning the water into wine. Yes, it's a miracle. So it's I'm so happy to be here, and I am also the CEO of the Dallas Mavericks, where our workplace promise is every voice matters and everybody belongs. And we have been working a wonderful agenda, and I see 3 of our female leaders, maybe 4 out there in the audience. They are incredible, so I am proud to be here as their leader.
I'm Cullum Clark. Byron stole my trick, but I was going to say I'm the husband of Nita Clark, father of Lily and Annabelle Clark, and I have the privilege of working on economic policy issues here at the Bush Institute, thinking a lot about the challenge of how we create cities, towns, and neighborhoods that will ensure opportunity for everyone in our country.
Yeah. It's important. Yes, we can clap for him. I wanted you all to tell people who you were, because I think it's important for people to introduce themselves, tell the world who they want them to know who they are, but also because what you're doing in your communities, it's truly life-changing, what you all have been able to accomplish. And since we're at the Bush Center, I want to start with you, Cullum. Tell me about the work that you all have been doing thus far. You know, a lot of people talk about the conversation started in 2020 with the death of George Floyd, but you all have been working far before that to ensure equality in our area and around it.
Well, I think the Bush Institute's been doing a great deal ever since it came into being, and I think I probably should leave it to others to tell the whole story, but just to say something about what I've had the privilege of working on since we've been here. We really launched very much into this very challenging issue of how do we actually create an economy that really works for all Americans, that really creates as much opportunity as we humanly can do. And we recognize, as we've just been hearing from this wonderful panel that we've just heard, there's a great deal of unfinished business in the civil rights movement, unfinished business of our whole effort to create a more perfect union. So what have we been actually doing? We have focused very much on, I would say, analyzing, quantifying, but ultimately trying to come up with solutions for the many obstacles and challenges that hold back opportunity. So for example, we are trying to understand, for example, some of the ways that bad policies, sometimes at the federal level, sometimes state or local level, block opportunity for people, and typically block it disproportionately among historically excluded populations. So we're analyzing it, but we also very much are in the solutions business here, so we can absolutely talk about some ideas that we have. But we have spent a fair bit of time thinking about the history of our own city here, the history of Texas cities, the history of cities all over America.
Yeah, and just a real appreciation for what you all are working on, because it's important to know your issue before you can fix it, right? And so many people, especially these days, they still say there's no problem. We're all good. Everything's good here. And as Byron will tell you, many people tell him we're all good here, and Byron says, I got numbers to prove otherwise.
Yeah. One of the things that I think we have to just reconcile is the facts. And that's kind of one of the things that I think is probably the biggest challenge that we're facing right now, is facing the truth. And I think some of what we saw in 2020 was probably some of the most inspiring times, but then also I think some of the most perilous times in our country as far as moving forward with regard to race and racism. You saw from the criminal, I think from the activist community, almost kind of a fervor towards seizing the moment, because we realize, wow, this doesn't happen very often. But the numbers are suggesting that we have a problem, and we have had a problem for a long time. When you look at the people who have the most of the things that you don't want, and then the least of the things that you do, those communities are always the communities of color, particularly when you're looking at urban centers, right? And so one of the things that I keep coming back to when we're saying, hey guys, we have a problem and so we need specific solutions, is the reality that it boils down to a couple of things. One, either there's a problem with the actual DNA of people of color, or we have a systemic issue in our society. Because there's no other reason why you would see the same issues that I just talked about in Dallas, Houston, Austin, but Seattle, Baltimore, St. Louis, right? In spite of any regional differences, in spite of economic and industry differences, you see the same issues, and they've been intractable for a long time, even in spite of certain policy changes and things that we've been able to do. So when we talk about what do we need to do, we have to get honest about the truth. And the truth is, we as a country have not reconciled the history of racism that has existed in our country for so very long. And it's not one of those things that we don't know how to do. There have been examples of it being done across the country. The question is, do we have the collective will to lean into those kinds of solutions and recognize that there's a self-interest for every single human being in this country, and reconciling and creating an equitable community where we all have equally present opportunity for us to succeed?
Yeah, yeah. It's beautiful. And the operative word that you're using there is collective, because we all have realized that we cannot do this alone. And if you're in this room right now, you probably have realized what you're seeing around you is just not right. You know, and Cynt, I see what you all have done with the Mavericks. I mean, several initiatives that you all have worked with. And just on a personal note, when I saw you get hired by Mark Cuban, I said, someone who looks like me holds a position like that.
Yes.
That's how I felt. So if I felt that way, can you imagine what little girls thought, you know, in that moment? And to your point, they still felt like, that's nowhere I could get to.
Right.
She did that. That was amazing. She's a unicorn.
I want to make them proud. And yes, I'm the first, but I won't be the last. And I work every single day to make sure that I'm not the last, and that we're bringing the second, third, fourth, and fifth along. And that's what we are about at the Mavs. In June of 2020, we just said we needed to take some action. We were having all these conversations internally and just in the aftermath of the whole George Floyd murder. And so we were so worked up, we said, okay, we're going to take these conversations outside. And we're going to have a big community, courageous conversation, socially distant. So we said, you know, we are natural conveners. We bring people together. That's what we do at the arena. That's what we do for a living. We bring people together. So we're going to use our platform in a very different way. And so we brought 200 people to the plaza of our arena, and we had a courageous conversation. And the theme was listen, learn, unite. And we wanted people to just listen about the history of race in this country, listen about the actual experiences by systems, because systemic racism is real. So we wanted to address the systems: public policy, healthcare, child welfare, education, the economic system, criminal justice. We said we want to go deep in all these systems. And so we had all the leaders of those systems from Dallas, the head of the education system, county judge. And so we all got together and said, give us the current state of the history of blacks here in Dallas. So we focused on Dallas. Tell us what we need to do. Give us some thoughts about how we can improve that experience. We want to learn. We want to listen. We talked about stereotypes. We took everybody through an exercise where we could all feel what it feels like to be marginalized, to have to respond to stereotypes all the time. So we went through that kind of exercise. And then we said, okay, what's the answer? And listen, learn, unite. Unite around what? And we put together something called Mavs Take Action, with an exclamation point. And the action stands for advocacy, communication, training, investment, outreach, and noise. Investment in community, investment in education. We said we're gonna spend a minimum of $5 million. I know Katie's out there laughing because that was almost probably the first year we spent that. And 10,000 volunteer hours, and we're going to really focus on driving sustainable change. That was the big thing for us, sustainable change. 50 initiatives around education, around supporting minority businesses, around voter activation and registration, I mean, just all of that. 50 initiatives to really drive sustainable change and make a difference in this community so that we can really live out our workplace promise in the community. Every voice matters and everybody belongs. And that's what we're about. And so what I told our team is, don't talk about it, be about it. Mavs take action.
Yeah. And what you're seeing here is a common theme, right? So these organizations, these people have seen an issue, they've seen a problem, and they're finding actionable solutions that can get other people involved, because we can't change it by ourselves. One of those ways, Cullum, you all are doing that is with economic empowerment. Yes. And I want to mention this. We had a call before we all came out here. Yes, we still do Zoom calls, y'all. We still have to do it. And I use the words financial literacy. And Cullum and Cynt Marshall and Byron, they all said, hey, we don't really say that much anymore. And I tell you this story because this is what communication does, and this is what community does. And I said, well, what do you mean? You know, we used that word a week ago on the air. What do you mean? Cullum, explain why that's no longer the terminology, whether economic empowerment is what we're using.
Well, yeah, I think that there is a growing understanding of the many systemic factors that result, for example, in a number of people growing up not knowing a lot of basic financial stuff that actually turns out to be pretty handy if you're going to own a home or start a business or something. There's a lot of reasons why that's so, and you know, I think the emerging idea is referring to not knowing all those things as a form of illiteracy is not a very constructive way to think about it.
Because it furthers what we're trying to stop.
Right, the stereotype that we don't know.
It's probably a lot more useful to think that we're all growing, we're all learning, and we can all help each other. We can lift each other up. We can engage in coaching. We can engage in mentoring. We can certainly empower people. So I think that's kind of where the hopefully the messaging goes, but not just the messaging, the reality. There's a lot of successful programs out there that are doing these various things. Oftentimes, small faith-based efforts in a single neighborhood. Sometimes it's something kind of broader. We're trying to identify and celebrate those efforts, things that are working.
Yeah, and I think that's one thing that most of us can see in our everyday lives. I mean, we're all not perfect when it comes to money. You know, we just... No,
we're not perfect.
No.
We're not perfect.
We're just all not perfect when it comes to money. But Byron, you get to see it on a daily level, how this truly changes people's lives when they aren't understanding the way that they should, what happens next when you get out of high school, when you get out of college, if you can make it to college.
Yeah, and I love this framing of empowerment, right, as opposed to literacy, because one of the things that comes with being poor is when somebody comes and tells you, hey, you've got to save more, or here's what a savings account is. They're like, save what?
Literally. Yeah.
Can you help me make some money, please?
Right.
That would be nice, right? And so but the truth is, a lot of our young people, particularly in the work that we do here at Big Thought, a lot of our young people don't even know what their options are. They don't know what's possible. They don't even know what a viable pathway is. And I was telling a story about a young brother who I was mentoring years ago, and he was in an after-school program. And this guy was smart, really, really whip smart. One of the smartest kids I think I ever worked with. He didn't show his work because he figured it all out in his head. I said, all right, man, hey, dream big. What do you want to be when you grow up? What do you want to be? And he said, I want to be a tire mechanic. He said, I want to work on cars. Now, I just told this kid, who was one of the smartest kids that I'd worked with before, I said, dream big. And the big for him was a mechanic. Why? Well, it's because in the community that he lived in the neighborhood where he existed, when he looked at the options around him, he looked at what people were doing, he saw that there were people who were unemployed, people who were working day and night really hard just to get by. He saw people who were doing non-W-2 jobs, right, that brought sustenance in a different kind of way. He saw people working.
Really,
you see what I'm talking about?
It was really well done.
You knew exactly what I was talking about.
Stated it. Everybody here knew what he
You're
was
talking my childhood.
You know what I'm saying?
That's fair. And you can't show your work without.
But here's the thing, right? But he saw people surviving the best way they knew how, and of all those choices, the big idea, mechanic. Now, mechanic is a perfect job. It's a wonderful job. There's a lot of excellent things that you can do. But keep in mind, this is a kid who should have been saying NASA. He should have been talking about going to MIT. He should have been talking about building, inventing, creating, but he hadn't seen it.
Right, you can't be it if you can't see it.
Exactly. And so when we talk about why it's really important that we don't create concentrated poverty, why we don't wall people off from opportunity to be able to see how big the world is and that they belong in it, then you limit people's imagination. And imagination is one of the most powerful tools to move ourselves forward and actually create the kind of society that we want. So when we talk about that economic empowerment, when we bring young people into opportunity, when we widen the lens, we open the aperture for them, you create a brand new pathway. And it's not about us injecting greatness into people. People are great. People are great. If we give them the opportunity to live that greatness, watch what happens. And that's what we're talking about when we're talking about that economic empowerment.
That's exactly right. One of the terms that I really don't like is, and I grew up, quote unquote, an at-risk child. And I say our kids are at risk. They are at risk of being doctors. They're at risk of being lawyers. They're at risk of being engineers. They're at risk of greatness. What we have to do is invest in them. And so that's what we're doing at the Mavs. We're leading an effort at Adele Turner Elementary School.
That's
we
my
just said,
school.
is that your school?
That's my school.
We have adopted that
Look
school.
at God.
Tigers, come on.
We have adopted that school. We have just said we're going to go in there with those honeys. We're going to wrap around them. We're going to wrap around their parents, wrap around the faculty. Yes, of course, we're going to put a gym in there with a big, horse head in the middle of the floor. That's a given. We're actually playing the Mavs right now. We're playing the Heat right now. Somebody tell me to score, okay? So yes, we're going to do that. That's a given. But we're going to put technology in that school. Bridge the digital divide because it is real. In fact, we have an initiative coming up in a couple of days. We're going out to Fort Oak Cliff and put in a new tech center. We have to go and wrap around these families, wrap around the children, wrap around the people who are trying to serve them. And it's all of us. It's up to all of us. I talk about that a lot. I think about the child welfare system. Each one of us can just take one of the systems and say, okay, I'm going to personally make a difference. My organization is going to make a difference. I think about the kids. If you think about in Dallas County, I don't know if people know this, Black kids make up 22% of the population in Dallas County. They make up 48% of the foster care system. That disproportionality should be something that we all care about. These are all of our children. What's happening with that? Okay, now I don't expect everybody to go out and adopt 4 kids out of the foster care system like we did, okay? But there is something that we can all do to figure out what's going on in that system, and then how do we serve these kids. And so that's what I like to do, is just have a call to action. What is the action that you are going to take? Whether it be to help drive change in the criminal justice system, like we're doing with the National Basketball Social Justice Coalition? Is it around police reform? Is it around education? Is it around economic empowerment? What are you going to do? Is it around voting rights? We took our AAC, the American Airlines Center, and turned it into the biggest polling station in the area.
That's right.
What can we do? We are about action. Yeah. It is about action, but especially when it comes to these honeys. Because I was one of those at-risk kids. I was one of those kids that was in, when he had a picture that said, poor but loved. Brian Washington had that. I was in tears in the back. That was me.
Yeah, you were.
Poor but loved. He talked about sharing the burden. That was my mom and my aunt in that picture. Sharing the burden, but people shared their burden and showed my mother how to put a math book in one hand and a Bible in the other, and kept me focused when everything was going on in our family, and just said, education is your ticket out. We can get our honeys out. So I'm focused on, we're going to have the next Brian Washington.
Come on.
We're going to have the next all of us, because it is up to all of us to make it happen. We have some serious systemic problems of race in this country. We have a dark, sordid history that we cannot cover up, but we can drive sustainable change. That's what we're about at the Mavs.
And maybe also changing the way that we're thinking about it. So maybe a hand up and not a handout. I hear people a lot of times, they talk about the welfare system in this country and how people are getting handouts. I consistently hear people say it's a handout. And I say, well, in many situations, all they really need is a hand up. They just need an opportunity and a chance. I have never in this lifetime felt like I didn't have a chance. I never did. My sister has never felt like she never had a chance. Do you know how many people in this world don't have a chance? Right. That's how they feel. And so if you wake up every morning without hope, then what do you have? But with that, that kind of brings me to my next thing, Cullum, because what you all also work on is making sure that we're building generational wealth for these families. So we're not just staying where we are right now. It's okay, so now you've given them a hand up and not a handout. Big Thought has given them a big idea. So now they're moving on, but what can they do for the generations to come?
Sure, this is very much at the heart of what we work on here. I think we've oftentimes written about in our work, and a number of people have pointed out, in so many ways, we are not just over-regulating a lot of things, we're disproportionately regulating away opportunities for excluded people, particularly for black people. So the first thing we can do is let's turn that around 180 degrees. For example, we regulate the creation of micro businesses in all kinds of fields much more severely than we regulate businesses started by multimillionaires. We do that through excessive occupational licensing rules, all kinds of rules that make it hard to start a business. What if we didn't just, in general, try to deregulate, but we actually went out of our way to create opportunity to start businesses in a neighborhood at very small size? Made it a little more possible to get a small loan to create a small business. I think we've already shown this in some of our work, actually. We've looked at, there's enormous variety across cities in America, for example, and just how difficult the environment is for starting a small business. And you know what? The places that actually have a more friendly environment for starting a small business have a whole lot more small black-owned businesses. It works. Similarly, I think another real foundation to wealth building is, for a great many Americans historically, has been homeownership. We have created all kinds of obstacles to homeownership for people who start from limited means. Above all, we don't build enough homes. We have a systematic inability to create.
If you can find one.
Yeah, if you can find one.
Right,
And
or you can stop somebody from taking it away to build a mall or something.
We have just a clear, anyone who looks around now, anyone who looks at just how much, rent's going up at 15, 20%, more than 30% in Austin over the last 12 months. How about that? Rents up more than 30% in some cities. That is a massive national policy failure. And that absolutely blocks access to what has been the most reliable channel for multi-generational wealth building. One generation's home ownership becomes the next generation's small business or college education.
Exactly.
It is what creates opportunity over time. And I really want to suggest to you that the extremely low business ownership rates and home ownership rates among black Americans are the single biggest factor driving the enormous wealth disparities we see today. So empower a new generation of young people of every background, but especially historically excluded black people, to start businesses, buy a home at a reasonably affordable level, maybe get a small leg up in that. There's all kinds of structures we could use to do that better. And I think you will actually see, you'll see that wealth gap start to close. You'll see a whole generation of entrepreneurs come into being.
And let me just add, once those businesses are started, we have to keep those businesses going.
Yeah.
One of the things that I did when I came to the Mavs, I said, we did a lot. We had some immediate things to handle. And then I said, okay, I want to look at supplier diversity. Tell me, out of all of our purchasing spend, how much is being spent with minority and women-owned businesses? And then we set a goal. We said 50% of our dollars would go to minority and women-owned businesses, because we have to keep these businesses thriving. So it's one thing to get a hand up. You still need that hand. You need people to help you. And so we have resources, and we have to figure out exactly where they go. And that's why we have a holistic diversity, equity, and inclusion agenda. It's not just about talent. It's not just about saying we're going to have 50% women and 50% people of color in leadership. It is about supplier diversity, making sure we are giving to the community. It's about philanthropy. It's about all of that. That's how we keep things going. It's one thing to get up. We have to help people stay up.
Yeah, and something important to highlight here, I know that you all have been seeing the headlines where there's a lot of question about affirmative action, or if people are allowed to get these jobs, or they're just getting hired because they're black or because they're from minority communities. I need you to understand, and I think Cynt, you can really attest to this because of what you all have done in your senior offices, but people just need a chance. These are not people being hired simply because of the color of their skin, truly because they can do the job. They just weren't noticed before.
Exactly, and you're not taking a risk. What you're doing is making a conscious decision to make your business better.
Come on.
To make your business more profitable. When McKinsey talks about the diversity dividend, it is real. Our business is profitable. It is much more profitable. We are more in tune with the different market segments. We are a much better business because we have everybody at the table. And it's not just a seat at the table. For women, and people of color, we don't want just a seat at the table.
Yeah.
I want to own that table.
Amen.
And I don't want a folding chair. I want a big leather chair like everybody else. Okay?
Because these are real nice.
Yes,
nice.
we want these chairs.
Real.
We want these chairs.
Is it
Yes,
velvet?
you're not taking a
This
risk.
one is
You're making your
velvet.
business better. Yeah, you like these?
This is nice.
Okay, now I know where you can't go. Leave the chair here. Okay.
Lead a chair. We good.
But it's not risky. It's good business. It's the right thing to do if you want to be profitable. You will open up your business and open up your plans to everybody.
But how do we make sure that we're doing that, though, Byron? I mean, literally, your organization is called Big Thought. You have a lot of big thoughts. I've worked with you all in the past.
Yes.
But for those of us who don't work in your building, what are we supposed to be doing in our little communities, where we are at our workplaces, in our churches, where we're going on the weekends? What should we be doing? Actionable items to make sure that we're getting that same change.
First, it's actually get educated on the truth, right? I think that a lot of people were engaging that in 2020, and hopefully more people are continuing that. I think one of the biggest problems is a misdiagnosis of the problem. And so we end up with bad solutions because I don't think we have really sat with just the truth. And one of the things that I think that we have to do about that is this. We have I would say almost an existential crisis that's going on right now. In our schools, not only in Texas, but across the country, there's legislation that's come up that has impeded our ability to talk about things that allow us to get to the truth. And the thing that's scary about it is some of these pieces of legislation have talked about the fact that we cannot talk about or should not encourage discussion about things that make some people uncomfortable.
You know what's uncomfortable? Water hoses,
Yes.
dogs, shooting people that look like my sons. That's what's uncomfortable. And in order to deal with some of that, we have to go all the way back and educate people on the history. Because if you don't know the history, it will repeat itself.
100%. And let's add on top of that, even when we talk about the history of our own state, we talk about Texas history. Think about a Mexican-American or someone of Mexican-American descent. Think about how we have talked about Texas history since I was young and probably even before. Think about how many of them feel when we were just creating good guy versus bad guy. You know who the bad guys were? It was Mexico. And in some places, how it's taught, Mexicans, right? Now, if we don't tell the full history around the nuance of what happened in the formation of our state, then we miss catching a wide swath of people, because as you all probably have noticed, our state's getting browner. The country is getting browner, right? Why don't we go deeper into why there was a conflict between white Texans and Mexicans? Why don't we go deeper into why there was a conflict between the white landowners and the Mexicans who were there before? Why don't we talk, where does slavery fit into that whole conversation? Because we haven't engaged that nuance, what we're getting is a lot of young people who actually are going out and finding the truth and then coming back into a room, into a classroom, where they're disallowed from even asking the question. And so when we talk about making some people feel uncomfortable, there were a whole lot of people uncomfortable for years and years, and we never cared. But now, it's a problem. So let's dive into the honest space where we can teach Black, white, Latino, Asian people how to talk about race, instead of running away from the conversation and ending up as adults with power, agency, and responsibility and not knowing what to do about it. And so we end up stuck for decade after decade after decade because we have hurt ourselves We've disabled ourselves from taking on some of the most intractable but also most important problems in our society. I don't want to be having this conversation 30 years from now. Everything that happened up to now, anything that happened before you were born, you didn't have anything to do with that. But you know what? If we're having this same conversation 50 years from now, that's on our watch.
Right. Right.
So we have to dive into this moment. We have to stand against anything that would disallow us from leaning into this moment with education, with young people. And we need to make sure that we're creating space to learn about the truth, reconcile with it, and then build good strategies that have the right attribution of the problem set at the center of it. That's what I say we need to be doing in every place, space, church, business, corporation, any place where you are. Make space for the truth and lean into these discussions about race. Get uncomfortable.
Get uncomfortable. Because it really is about the journey. It's about the journey. And when you're on a journey, you need to know what the starting point is. And I was born in Birmingham, Alabama. The church where those 4 girls lost their lives, Carol, Denise, Cynthia, and Addie Mae. I call their names every morning. The girls who lost their life in the 16th Street Baptist Church, that was my mother's church that she left 3 years before that happened. My mother has 4 girls and 2 boys. I could have been one of those girls. I know that history. I know Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King. I had uncles that marched with him. I know that story. And I was in California. They left when I was 3 months old to go to California, but I know the story. I know the journey. That was my starting point. And part of why I'm here right now is because I know that journey. I know what was expected of me. I know about my ancestors and what all they went through and the dreams they had for me. I know I sit here today, I can tell you unequivocally, or whatever the unequivocally.
You're there. You're there.
Right there with you.
Unequivocally.
There you go.
I had to say it. I can tell you I am my ancestors' wildest dreams.
Come on.
And I know that. I know that. They had dreams for me. But the only way I know that is because I know that story. My parents didn't cover that up. My schools, my teachers, they didn't cover that up. And that's what's in me right now. I think about all of that as part of my journey and part of my obligation to make sure some of the things they went through, that I work every single day, like somebody worked every single day for me, to make sure that people don't go through that, to make sure that kids don't go through that. But if we cover it up, we won't understand the journey. We won't even know where we are on the journey.
Yeah. Cullum, I'll let you have the last word on this.
Well, I hope as many people as possible see the wonderful art of Brian Washington. There is no substitute for seeing powerful, moving imagery that tells a story in ways that all the history books in the world, the college classes, everything can't possibly match that. I hope as many people as possible see it here and around the country. So I'm really glad we were able to do that here. You know, a lot of people like to imagine sometimes that the past is behind us. The past is never past. Everything we did up until this point made us what we are today, for better in many respects, but in a whole lot of not so great ways as well. The continual struggle still has a lot of unfinished business, and it's really an honor to be trying to address it with all of you all here tonight.
And you are unequivocal about that.
You got it. You did it. You did it.
Yeah.
Look at that. Well, thank you all so very much. This was not just an enlightening conversation, but I think it's good communication. And now we can kind of comprehend what needs to happen and what we need to do leaving out of here. Yeah. You know, one of the things that I see every day in the news, when people always say, I don't watch the news anymore because everything is so bad and everything is so negative, and I don't like watching the news because it's so negative. Well, we can make it positive. Yes. Yes. You could send me an email about something great that you're doing in your community to help others in minority communities within your community. You could do that. So until that starts to happen enough, I have to fill 2.5 hours of the police blotter that I am sent. So I just thank you all for being here today. I think this is an important conversation in which we can make this a movement and not a moment.
Yes.
2020 changed the way a lot of us started thinking. I mean, it changed the way that I live as a Black woman. So I think that what we need to do is ensure that we understand what's going on. Yes. I think we get it because we're in this room, so we get it. The point is for you to take everything you learned and heard here today and put it out there, because those people need to get it too. Right?
Yes.
So we really, really appreciate all of you being here. Again, the Brian Washington exhibit is happening. Before you start clapping, I have some words from our sponsors. The Bush Center is grateful to Next Point for doing this series and to Boeing for sponsoring the Continual Struggle exhibit and tonight's program. All of this was possible thanks to them. And tickets are available at bushcenter.org for the next Engage at the Bush Center event on March 8th. That's a program connected to the Liberty and Laughter special exhibit on the lighter side of the presidency. Headliners that night are three very funny and former presidential speechwriters, Karen Hughes, Landon Parvin, and David Litt. So all that's going to be coming up. And on your way out tonight, as we were talking about before, please take time to visit Brian Washington's work. As I told you before, I went up there, and maybe it was because I was in there kind of by myself and just looking at it, but you can see the pain. Mm-hmm. It's pain in the eyes of not just the adults that he puts into his art, but the children as well. Mm. Imagine being 8 or 10 or 5 and dealing with what they dealt with. So yes, we have come a long, long way, but y'all, we have so far to go. So let's be the ones to be the change that we want to see. And as they were saying earlier, I just love when Congressman John Lewis said, you got to get in good trouble. Yes. So let's go get in some good trouble. Okay?
Necessary trouble.
Thank y'all so much.
Thank you, President Bush.
Thank you.
That was fantastic.